What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Spark to Fire. I'm your host, Landon Rhodes, and today I've got Sonny Han on the show. Thanks for coming on today, Sonny.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, dude, I'm excited about this. So, as you guys know, we've got some individuals who I've known for a long time that I have on the show, and we have people that I'm meeting for the first time that I'm also interviewing. So I'm just excited to just dig into this. But Sonny and I actually met through a cold email. Somebody on his team reached out to me and just said, "Hey, I think this would be a fun episode. You guys should chat about this." So, Sonny, just for our audience, I'd love for you to give them a little bit of context about who you are. And then what we'll do after we do that is jump right into kind of your origin story of what were things like when you were a kid and how did that play into who you turned out to be today?
Cool. Yeah. My name is Sonny. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Fulcrum. We are a manufacturing operating system that is replacing old school ERP platforms and helping mid-level and small business manufacturers get to the future. So
really quick, what's an ERP for the people who have no idea?
An ERP is like what your iPhone or your cell phone is for a business. It's the one-stop place where all of your information goes that you can put everything into, and then where you go to find answers about your business that you need. It doesn't have to be fancy software. It doesn't have to be an application like Fulcrum. But if you're running a business, no matter how big it is, small, medium, or large, you almost always need to have something to aggregate all of your thoughts, all of your information, and pull out insights on, should I put money into sales? Should I take this job? When can I get it by? And operate through it. So for us, our goal is to make our product as easy to use for the end users that are doing the production, doing the shipping, doing the purchasing and receiving, so that the owners of the businesses can have really great live fluid data to make decisions on.
Awesome. So tell me about your origin story.
Well, it's generally kind of hard for me to talk about myself, so I'll probably stumble through this. But I came to this country as an immigrant when I was 4 years old. I barely remember China. My parents came here for graduate school, and when the Chinese government kind of cracked down on protests that the college students were having in Beijing, this country, George Bush Sr., gave all of those students that were here in the U.S. blanket amnesty and allowed them to stay, gave them green cards and permanent residency. And my parents got me out of the country, I think like a week before they locked the borders down. And I've been in the U.S. ever since. I'm a U.S. citizen now, extremely grateful for everything this country's provided to me in terms of opportunity. Grew up here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and kind of just lucked out on a lot of things. I was an only child. A lot of the random knowledge I had is because I had mono right after my dad's boss gave him an encyclopedia that I read through. My mom locked me in a room because she thought mono was super contagious, so would bring me food every single day. But I read the entire encyclopedia A to Z, and I know that sounds like a weird thing, but I think it helped me to really develop this habit of being curious and learning things and reading about a lot of things.
What was this encyclopedia about again? I'm sorry, I missed that.
It was just a general encyclopedia. It wasn't Britannica, it was World Book is what it was called.
Yeah.
And it was just A through Z, every single book.
Oh my gosh.
Every word of it. So
that is incredible. So and would you consider yourself like somebody who has a photographic memory? Did that stick with you, or was that you'll randomly pull stuff out of your subconscious still today, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, I think it was a stub out for a lot of different pieces of information, just like getting a good broad spectrum sense of everything that existed in the world. And I think there are a lot of really cool illustrations. I don't have a true photographic memory, but when I read a book, I can remember what was in what chapter and on what page and where in the page it was. I can't kind of recall what it looks like, but the information gets into my head. And I think reading a lot as a kid was good practice. And this was, I was when I got my first computer, I was 7 years old. This was 1992, and was on the internet just because my mom was a computer science student, a master's degree student at the University of Minnesota here, and then was a computer scientist, a software engineer at a startup right after that. So just a lot of random serendipitous things that happened to me that I couldn't have controlled, I didn't ask for,
Hmm.
just gave me a lot of exposure to technologies and things way earlier than other people. So
Yeah. So you get over mono, right? And
mhm.
clearly you got over that. And you're growing up and being exposed to tech at a super young age obviously is very helpful. The little bit of exposure that I had to tech when I was young, I still attribute to like my ability to like pick things up quicker than the average person. It matters. 100%. So talk about that journey and how it plays into who you are today with your business.
Yeah, I think more specifically, it gives you a sense of safety with technology. I think a lot of people get frustrated when they hit a roadblock or something doesn't work, but there's this like intuitive or innate understanding that it's just a computer. We told it what to do, and we just didn't use it right, and it
Mm.
maybe wasn't written correctly, or maybe I'm not using it correctly, but it is solvable. You can figure it out. So even at a young age, my mom would go to class or do lab work, and I would hang out at Shepherd Lab here in Minnesota. Which, funny story, they Shepherd Lab was the home of GopherNet, a competitor to the World Wide Web that we use today. It
Oh, wow.
clearly lost, but there were some just really wild memories of some of her lab mates and colleagues teaching me stuff and showing me how to do things that really kind of accelerated my understanding of how software works, how computers work, how the internet works. So I started taking math at the University of Minnesota at a young age through a program that they had there. Again, just incredibly lucky that these programs even existed, right? Like it could have been another city that I lived in, and I wouldn't have had these types of experiences. But was just a weird computer nerd all throughout my high school, middle school career. So
Gotcha. Okay, so you go from computer nerd to now owning a super successful software company that's helping manufacturers. So like talk to us about that jump of how, where did that big change in your life happen?
going into college, I actually had a big like crisis in faith. Like it had become who I was at the time. I don't know, maybe hormones or something like that. But as a senior in high school, I just wanted to do something other than software. And I had won some math competitions and won some scholarships and turned all of them down to go study medicine and pathology and pharmaceuticals, and realized, oh, actually all that experience is kind of valuable, and where I was really comfortable and just kind of had a head start in a lot of things. I was learning a lot of new things and didn't really fit in with the culture of all the other people who were trying to become doctors, and uh, clearly it didn't work out. Dropped out of medical school, dropped out of the program in general, and then kind of found a home in chemistry, in analytical chemistry, and just really went through a series of random events, bumbling around in consulting. I think one of the things that felt extremely weird at the time, like I had no direction, like I had no destination to get to, resulted from me just saying yes to things. People were like, "Hey, you want to help me do this thing for my friend's cabinet shop? They have this old system and they need to write some reports on it." And I said, "Yeah," and I helped them and I did it. And then somebody else said, "Hey, do you want to work on this contract with the SBA to go audit a bunch of companies that are failing and see if you can help find a plan to recover them?" And I just said yes. And so I think at the time, my mom and my dad had a lot of criticism about like what is your life going to be about? Like, can you maybe focus a little bit and choose a career path and go down it? But I actually think saying yes to a lot of those things and just being really open minded about it, I think that's really what led me to even find that there was a problem in manufacturing and in the
Mm.
software that runs most manufacturers. So um, I don't know that I can recommend that as a path. I think that uniquely for me, it was a result of shame and like not making it in medicine and
You
not
just wanted to
really
be
knowing.
successful in something.
Yeah, I wanted to do something that I could, yeah, that I could do good at again, that I could contribute something to. I wanted to be useful again. And I think that feeling of wanting to be useful, about contributing, about building something that's valuable, I don't know where I really got that from. A mixture of parenting, my friends from childhood, but I think it's that emotion that really drove me toward these types of experiences. But um, I think had I just gone down the computer science path, went to school for that, got a job as an engineer, I don't know. Maybe that part of me wouldn't have awoken, but I think all these different business experiences and human experiences, talking to a manufacturing facility just outside of Omaha that was run by the same family that is only doing a few $1 million in revenue, but really understands the parts that they're making and who they're making it for. There was just a whole world of people that, as a person who wrote websites and made custom burn Napster CDs for people in high school, that there's just no way that I would have been exposed to that part of the world. So I think I'm mostly really grateful for the fact that I even chanced into an opportunity to meet so many of these people so many years ago.
That's fascinating. So can you share who the company out of Omaha was?
I probably can't actually, but they were making components for irrigation systems, for large
Yeah,
like above ground irrigation systems. So
got it. Yep, understood. That's funny. I used to work for one of those companies, so that's fascinating. So with that knowledge, you basically kind of became a Swiss Army knife for tons of these different companies, starting off at a cabinet making shop. It sounded like you had conversations with people with above ground irrigation. Like, that's fascinating to me. And I am a huge believer in that your experiences that ultimately add up to what you are and who you are today, those all play into how you became successful in what you are today. Specifically, like for me, I can call back to customer support and customer experience. I mean, I had specific days where I would come in the morning and somebody would basically have a mental breakdown on the phone with me because the crops that they were trying to get irrigated were not getting irrigated because of the system that we sold them. Something had happened, whether it was our fault or not our fault. I still had to like coach them through that moment. And I basically had like 2 years of coaching people through these really, really angry situations that they were in, regardless of whose fault it was. Like, we had to get the issue resolved. And that problem solving, I know that does something in your mind, because basically it's like having somebody behind your desk screaming at you, and you're like, okay, well, I still have to solve this problem whether or not you're screaming, right here or not. So did you find yourself it sounds like you're really grateful for all those things that you didn't know you would end up doing.
yeah, and to your point, I think that some of the most like humble or like unimpressive experience that I've had actually have been the most formative. I tell this
Mhm.
story about how I didn't do well in school because I was playing too much World of Warcraft and was part of this #1 ranked World Raid Guild. But the detail of that story is that I wasn't the raid leader of that group. I wasn't the guild leader. I didn't have any sort of management skills or whatever. I was tech support. One of my co-founders wrote an ERP system essentially for the video game to help us manage our resources and plan the fights out. Um, and he went on to work at Google as one of their top engineers for a while. He was one of my co-founders for a while. That is sadly no longer part of the business, but he was the kind of the brains, the CTO of the organization. The raid leader was another one of my co-founders. He was the leader of the organization. I was the person deploying our custom software to a bunch of video game players, half of which had no idea what was going on, and I would literally remote desktop into their computers and set it up for them. That was my job. I was the primary tech support person. So I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but
No, I get
I
it.
think
Yeah.
in those experiences, I think I learned also what it meant to have a group of people that are doing something with you and for you, and how to support them, and that their success, the success of the team that you have, is actually way more important than who the leader is and what they're saying. So I think that stayed with me a lot. We talk internally about how people come first, and then the products, and then our profits and our growth, which certainly having venture backed capital helps with that. But um, enabling the team, empowering them, giving them the ownership of both parts of the company and the work that they're doing, that I think is the big thing that I started to learn even back then, and then later on in life as well.
That's awesome. I love the fact that you created an ERP system for World of Warcraft.
Yeah, way a long time ago.
And so, just nerd out with me for a second on this. you would have resources. And I was more of a RuneScape fan, so I didn't actually play World of
Similar
Warcraft a
though.
ton. Yeah, and so I understand like something, I think, of what you're saying, but I am fascinated to understand, like, so basically you're just like, you have a certain amount of resources and you have calculations of like, if we run into this many bad guys, basically like these three things are going to happen and that's going to hurt our resources. And that's how long we have until we can survive. Is that kind of like how it worked, or walk me through that?
Yeah. The nomenclature, I can't believe we're talking about this, but the
I love it.
nomenclature in World of Warcraft is that these boss fights are typically called encounters. Like when you first meet it, if you're one of the top like guilds in the world, there's nobody telling you how these fights go. Like you're literally one of the first people to ever see it. So you're essentially just going to see what happens, what the mechanics are. Does the boss like hit you really hard? Does it run around really fast? What does it do? And then you're planning out how you deploy your 40 people out. There's a lot of people that you have to coordinate and how they work. And there are people that do damage and people that heal and people that take the hits. And um, you have a limited amount of mana, you have a limited amount of health, you have a limited amount of potions to restore all of that, and you can basically distill the entire game down into over a static amount of time or a dynamic amount of time. There's a certain calculatable amount of total mana you're going to regenerate, the total amount of health you're going to be able to heal and turn things into, and that's your cap. If you can't get to a point in time where you're able to defeat the boss with the resources that you have, you shouldn't even start the fight, right? And I think a lot of people don't think about games like that, and maybe
Yeah.
it's a bit cold to think about it like that. But that was the premise of this: is like, who has what potions, how much mana supply do they have, what is their gear, their items, what are they doing to enhance their spells, and what is that theoretical maximum, and where are we compared to that? And then down to the mechanics of the game: do we turn left or turn right here? Like one of the things that Trevor coded into the system was there was a fight where you just had to decide to turn left or right, and people were so busy with the fight they couldn't figure it out, and he just figured out a way to put a giant arrow on your screen that says turn left, and he would go left and do something. So a lot of that was just recognizing that people are busy with other parts of their jobs essentially, and how do we assist them, but also how do we make decisions in the moment. If somebody dies in the middle of the fight, well, obviously that their entire pool of health and mana is gone. Well, that changes your decision making process for the rest of the fight. And once you crest a point in time where it's impossible to win anymore, then you may make the decision just to have everybody toss it in and exit the dungeon, or just throw themselves at the boss, die, and run back and start over again. So it, it is a weird way to think about games, but it was a very useful way to think about things that gave us a competitive edge, and how fast we were able to figure out how to solve these boss fights.
I love it. I relate these boss fights to life and business, because you talk about, okay, well, how many people do we have on our team? How much time do we have? How much money do we have? It comes down to money, time, people, resources. You're just basically learning how to play that game algorithmically instead of just shooting in the wind. And I
Yep.
think that's what
Yeah.
a lot of people probably did as soon as they got on that platform and that game, is they're just like, oh, okay, well, we'll learn and we'll come back and we'll try and figure it out next time. But you're just like, no, this is a formula. Like there's math here that we can figure this out. And I really I like that. It's cool.
It helps to know that it was a computer program that somebody made to make the game, right? It has to be bound by some rules, but life is a little less clear than that. But absolutely, there are general mathematical concepts and relationships that exist in business that are easy to see and utilize, that can be very helpful too.
From that point, I love the fact that we were able to relate World of Warcraft to business and life. That's super fun. I never played it, but I definitely do want to play it someday, just to have an understanding of what the hype was all about, because it was something, in the early 2000s that just like blew people's minds and they were super passionate about. So how did that experience, and just the way that you learned to work with teams, and the way that you basically were able to calculate, like you said, an ERP for this game, how were you able to like spin that into what you do today with Fulcrum?
This is also a weird story. I don't know how you're pulling all these weird stories out of me, but before I joined this particular guild. I ran my own actually for many years, for 3 years, burned out doing it. w- I had the classical problem of a lot of founders where you have a hard time delegating. I managed the bank, I managed the recruiting of new players, I managed the distribution of treasure and loot, I managed like the actual raid fights, I managed everything. And did so much that I burned out and joined this other guild. But I think one of the things that I expected when I joined them was that they were number one in the world. Like they were going to be filled with these incredible players that were all super good. But there were a lot of really good players on that team, but they actually had the same proportion of people that were somewhat incompetent, and the same proportion of people that were, you know, mediocre and really good. Like they had maybe a few more really good people than us. Um, but I think what I realized is that even though there are some players that were just not that great, they were part of the culture. They contributed in other ways. And I somehow seeing that contrast between my guild and theirs really made me realize that it's not actually just about getting the best people. It's also quite a bit about creating a really vibrant culture that people feel like they fit in. And so that experience just planted the seed in my head that I should look out for what creates good culture, but that also a group of people can do some cool stuff.
Hmm.
Like it was like some weird visceral proof to me that group dynamics, doing things as a team, is just the right way to do things. And so after that point in time, I don't think that I was like entrepreneurial. Looking back, I like again sold burned DVDs and made websites for people for money, and like sold T-shirts and stuff, and did a lot of things that could be retroactively seen as entrepreneurial. But I just needed money at the time to do fun things as a kid because my parents, um, you know, weren't really like for a whole big allowance that they gave me. Like that wasn't how our family was run.
Right.
Um, but I think later in life, I was always looking for, is there an opportunity for me to do something that would actually be valuable for the world? And could I do it with a group of people that I would really enjoy working with, and do it in a way that I found to be super classy and super awesome? And I think I had two failed businesses. I quit my job two different times to try to start something and went back to the same job again after it failed. And I think both those times it failed for different reasons. It failed because once because I refused to take venture capital even though it was available and it was the right choice to do. I don't know why I thought that way. And there was another time where I was able to sell the product, but I wasn't able to get paid or wasn't able to actually build it correctly. There were just a lot of false starts where I learned, okay, you actually have to do all of these things really well. Um, but I think fundamentally what drove me to even try to start all three of those businesses is um, I think I wanted to experience my work life in a way that I believed was both better for the people I was working with and for myself as well. So
Mm.
it always has been about creating the correct environment for the right things to happen. And then with the manufacturing thing, the real lens that started to focus in on was that this is a big problem. Manufacturing is at the base of the pyramid upon which the rest of the economy is built. If you need switches in the internet, you need computers and routers and Ethernet cables. If you want to, grow crops, you need above ground irrigation systems, and now there's robots to plant your seeds exactly in the right place and to measure the pH of the soil and give you the correct nitrogen infusion. If you want to go to space, you need to build rockets. If you want to
Right.
um, you know travel between different places, you need trains and automobiles. Like everything is built, and everything that we build is built by businesses that are built on top of really old technology. And it's a really big market. It's huge. And it is possible that if we're as successful as I hope we're going to be, that we could slightly, if ever so slightly, change how the world works for the better a little bit, alter that trajectory a little bit. And for me, uh, my best friend when I was in middle school died when I was
Mm.
right after eighth grade, and I think that also changed something in me that increased this feeling of importance that I have on doing something meaningful, about leaving something that could be generationally valuable I don't think I thought like that at all before. Not that I expected my younger version of myself to think about that at 12 years old, but I think that has stayed with me, is just a little bit of a focus on what the purpose of life is. And for me, at least, the purpose of life is to try my absolute hardest to leave something valuable that can be used for a long period of time after I'm gone.
That's good, man. That's good. I love that why. And you're right, especially with honestly just the global political current status of society. Bringing manufacturing back to the United States and just continuing to build that up here is going to be so, so critical. And having technology that basically people can stack that onto, or they can tack that onto whatever's happening on the, on the manufacturing floor is so critical. So I'm curious to hear, I just want to like have you explain a little bit about what Fulcrum does and then how it's helping people right now. You said you're just in under 200 locations right now. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Super cool. So
yeah,
talk about
we
it.
we've we've grown a lot in just the last year alone. We've more than tripled in that time, and it's felt crazy. But to touch on one of the points that you made, um, I would go a little bit further and say it's not just about bringing manufacturing back to the United States. It's about being able to produce things where they're used. And to me, it always didn't make sense that we shipped a bunch of iron ore to China to have it turned into like, bar stock that then gets machined down into some component that then gets manufactured and then shipped right back to the US to be sold
Mm-hmm.
here, right? I know we've been able to gain a huge amount of global economic um, productivity because of strategies like that. But just like if you were to be playing, I don't know, Minecraft or some video game where you're designing how it would work, you just wouldn't do that. Like, you know what I mean? Like if it wasn't the economy the way it is right now,
Right.
you wouldn't, it just would seem silly, right? If you could make it locally here. So I think the right thing is to connect manufacturers together. If you visit any manufacturers that are making components that go into some product, they have framed pictures of where their work goes, whether it's a railroad switch box, they have a picture of it. The manufacturing people that are really good at making stuff, they love geeking out on what does this my work do for the world? What is this
Totally.
end useful thing, right? And yet most of them don't really know where they sit in the supply chain, and most of these
Right.
companies don't know how to find them. And it just seems like with all the technology we have right now, what a shame it is for one of these most important industries in the world to uh, feel so lonely and disconnected from each other. I think for me, the vision is creating this connected manufacturing network where people are easily able to transact business with each other, find new work, say that I can't do new work and find someone else to do it, and have it then over time be just a much more efficient market. And we'll be able to produce things cheaper, better, faster, stronger, and more locally to where we use it. And to me, that's an anchoring principle on how awesome it is things will be if we're successful at that. For now, we're focused on each individual manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's because the social contract we have with our customers is I need to work hard to make sure that each and every one of them receives an insane amount of value from the product that we use. Without that, there's no way that we're going to be able to scale at the speed that I need us to scale. And so for now, we are working on all the things that they need to be able to operate as a business, putting a quote out to a customer to say this is what it's going to cost, converting that quote to a sales order, managing that sales order, helping them find the best vendors to buy from and when to buy it, receiving that into inventory, managing their inventory values, to picking it to a job that they do on the shop floor, to the production and recording the time on it, to scheduling that work and when am I supposed to do it, to shipping it out and then invoicing it and collecting the money and doing that whole cycle over and over and over again and injecting really good quality methodologies inside that scope. And I think that for me, our answers are oftentimes different, sometimes better, hopefully better more often than not. But that mantra of doing things differently and doing things better is incredibly important to us as a company. And it's also simultaneously our biggest insecurity. We hire specifically less than 10% of our team is from a manufacturing background. And it's because we believe that there's this quantum leap that's available for the manufacturing industry. And it's not really going to happen with a bunch of inside folks deciding how the future is going to look. It just
Yeah.
hasn't ever been that way. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way whatsoever, but it also imbues in us this deep-seated insecurity where we maybe we overachieve because we want to make sure that the answer that we have is really good. And so we talk to a lot of customers, we listen to a lot of them, we try to come up with answers that are really unique and creative. But what we've settled on right now, where we deliver the most value, is taking their shop floors from paper into a digital tracker where everything is collected automatically. Because of that, because instead of writing on a piece of paper, they're just putting in a tablet, the production manager has the data of what's going on live. And because we have the live data, we can solve the scheduling problem. And because we can solve the scheduling problem, we can help them plan their capacities and plan their purchasing and their demand planning and things like that. So all of it is very much interconnected with each other. But we're just trying to take robust, mature technologies, web applications, networked applications, internet applications, concepts that are everywhere in every application that you use, and apply it in a correct and unique and better way for manufacturers. So I think 2.5 years ago, the product was very slim. It did a few things really well. Now it does very much more things very well, and it does a lot more things somewhat well. I
Hmm.
think we've grown so much. We've had so many customers that have blown up in size. They've increased their revenue by 5x over COVID,
That's so good.
for a variety of reasons. It's really encouraging to see. And now we're dealing with performance issues, so we got to make sure we can support them as well. And so there's always problems in every business. And for me, right now, I want to make sure that all these new people we've hired inherit this philosophy that all that really matters is making the customer receive value. And for us right now, that means their operations.
That's super good. I can tell you're really passionate about it, man. That's a special thing that you've got there. And with what you're building right now, you said there was a time in your life that you were afraid of taking money from a VC. And as we kind of wrap up in the next 10 minutes here, I want to cover a few minutes on like, why were you afraid? And then aside from the obvious reasons of being afraid of VC money, and then what changed in you to where you decided that was a good idea, and how's it going?
I think it was like equal parts arrogance, uh, bias, and immaturity. So part of the arrogance was that certainly there's a lot of really big businesses that make it without any venture capital, right? You can point to a bunch of companies. There's a lot of startups like MailChimp and Calendly that made it pretty big without any venture capital at all. They took some later on. So part of it was, why can't I do that? And the second part of bias was, you read a lot about losing control to VCs, them forcing you to sell or forcing you to do this or the other thing, forcing you to get some adult supervision, as they call it, hired into the company, things like that. That I didn't want to do and thought would ruin the company. And I think rightfully so, when a founder is influenced incorrectly by a VC to do something that causes them to fail, they're going to write something. They're going to spew it out. It's some of them are going to do that. It's a very painful moment. But I think I've come to realize that you know you can't judge those decisions based on how they turned out afterwards. It could have been actually the right advice in the moment, or no other advice could have come out, and that you can't blame an external VC that you talk to once a quarter or once a month for you not navigating the business correctly. So I think part of that was just quelled by more maturity, and other parts of the immaturity was just not understanding why they would want to give money to me in the first place, and what this exchange of equity for dollars meant. And as I grew up and learned more about the world, it made a lot of sense. I didn't, even though I was talking earlier about how I had a friend die at a young age, and I really valued, like, really thought about mortality. That didn't mean that I thought I was going to die. And so when I was
Mm,
younger, when I was in my 20s, I just felt like time was this luxurious utility. And now in my 30s, I understand the value of the venture capital. It's because you can try your hardest and have the best idea, and you can still fail. If you can do that in 4 years or 7 years instead of 20 years or 30 years, you get to try more times if you fail for reasons you can't control. And so
mm.
the time value of money was something that I understood from a spreadsheet, but just didn't understand personally. And I
Wow.
absolutely understand it right now. So
Wow. I've never ever heard that comparison before of talking about speeding up failure. And wow, that really hit, man. That's a really great point, because how many times do you see successful, even moderately successful business owners that are 17, 18 years in, that you probably ask this question a lot, like, what if you would have just taken capital at age 4?
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and and you
how
can't
far
predict the
in were
future.
you? How far in were you when you took it?
Oh man, 4 years in.
4 years in.
Um, we tried 4 years to bootstrap it, and we made some progress. And looking at it, it's kind of cute actually. I think we learned a ton, right? We built fully custom ERP systems for people. We built modules for people. We just did whatever we could. We integrated different systems for people. I think that experience has made it into the fabric of who we are as a company. It's taught us a lot of things that had we not known, we could have deployed venture capital and failed because we didn't learn those lessons. So
Right.
I don't want to undercut how valuable those experiences were, but they ultimately, I think, if I were to go back in time and erase all my knowledge except for one piece of advice, I would have told myself, do this for a year, try it out, really believe you're going to switch to a product company and just take venture capital and scale it and try to build it that way, instead of hanging on to it for as long as I did. And I think the two things that I learned is, number one, you're not even aware of 1/10 the reasons you're going to fail. Like, there are so many reasons that you
Mm.
can't even see right now. You look at the people that have had 30-year, 40-year journeys of extreme success, and you think they were going to make it all along. That's very much not the case. And then number two is that even though there are things that can make you fail and kill you, it's your work as a human being that overcomes them. And I think that's something that I don't know that I could even explain it to myself at 22, this concept that you are there to work on preventing that failure over and over and over again. Every challenge everyone speaks of about, we have to overcome this challenge, those are death threats, those are existential crises. And if you want to build and scale a company, you have to be tolerant of consistently and constantly facing those threats. And I think when I was
Mm.
younger, I thought that the name of the business game was to avoid those threats. And so I wouldn't think about them, or I would try to make business decisions to make it safer. And you can still build a business like that, but you just can't scale at a high speed if you're not tolerant of dealing with existential threats. So
That's interesting to think about risk as threats, because a lot of people would just synonym that word with, oh, that's what risk is. But you make
yeah,
it a little bit more personal and saying, no, that's actually a death threat. It's actually a death threat against my business. And I have to figure out how I'm going to either respond to that death threat, ignore that death threat, or basically what I'm going to focus on. Just super good.
exactly.
I've never heard it put quite like that. So you sound to me, and you seem from our short conversation here, very well studied, but much of your experience, I feel like, comes from something that you've experienced firsthand, not something that you've read about or watched a video about. Would I be correct in assuming that?
Yeah, even at a young age, my mom tells a story about how she told me not to touch the kettle, literally. And eventually she's like, all right, fine, touch it. And I touched it and I learned it was hot. So I do read quite a bit, but even at a very young age, it was always about, failing myself, in person and directly. So.
So what's as we've got a few minutes here to wrap, and I've got a hard stop at 1:00, and I know you've got a hard stop as well. So I wanna get these last questions out, but before I do, I want to give people an opportunity of how to connect with you, and then we'll finish out with some rapid fire questions. So where should people look you up? Talk about Fulcrum, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn and I don't post very much. I'm not very good at social media. I always say on podcasts that if you're listening to this, I'm very grateful for your ears, and you can just email me directly, sunny@fulcrumpro.com. Sunny like the weather, SUNNY@fulcrumpro.com. And I do have people reach out, but that I will respond to your email. Maybe a little later now than it used to be, but that's the best way to get in touch with me directly.
Awesome, dude. Very cool. And for anybody in manufacturing that's looking to take their software to another level, I would highly recommend you talk to Sonny and his team. And if you guys have software, don't have software, I looked at the product and I've done some research on it just before our call, and it looks super impressive. And I really like your pricing structure specifically. A lot of people are scaling up that per user cost, and obviously like that hurts some businesses. Like, and I get it. Like, the per user fee every month is how software companies scale up, and it makes a ton of sense. But that was one of the first things I noticed, that you guys actually don't have like a per user limit, at least on your unlimited program. So super cool.
Yep.
So rapid fire questions kind of finish things out here in the next few minutes. What is your favorite book, a book that's so good you've read it twice and you recommend it to people all the time?
Fiction or nonfiction?
Nonfiction and fiction. Nonfiction first.
Nonfiction, there's a book called Hooked by Nir Arwal. It talks about how products are addictive and how they can be addictive in a positive way and a negative way. I've read hundreds and hundreds of business books, but the way that it's written like the best textbook in the world. It has like cool illustrations. It's extremely to the point. It's not repetitive. If you've read a lot of business books, you'll probably have the same complaint that many of them are just repetitive over and over again, making the same point. It is the densest, kind of best takeaway book about research that's been done in the last 15 years that I've read in a long time. And the book that I reread over and over and over again is Neuromancer by William Gibson. It was written in 1985 or 1986 or something like that, and it's about his image of the internet, basically, and as we see it right now in the metaverse, as people are trying to create it. If you read the book, really try to imagine that it was written in the 80s, and then understand just how awesome it is. So,
Neuromancer. Okay, cool. I don't have any fiction reads, so I need to check that out. Yeah, that's awesome, man. Any parting pieces of advice, anything that you wish I would have asked you before we kind of close out the show here?
No, I think you asked great questions. And I think of all the podcasts I've been on, I think this has been one of the most enjoyable conversations I've had. So appreciate you and the preparation you've done and the way that you conduct yourself. So thank you for that.
Yeah, for sure thing, man. Well, it's been a blessing having you on here, and really appreciate just the knowledge that you've dropped on us and the experience and the wisdom. So that's awesome. And guys, if you want to see more people, hear more people like Sonny on the show, make sure you leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and a review. The written reviews actually stack up over time, and that really just builds you up in the algorithm so that we can get more amazing guests on. That way, when they look us up, they don't think we're crazy when we ask them to be on the show. And yeah, guys, I just really appreciate everybody that's out there listening. If you guys need video, paid advertising, or you want to launch a podcast and you have no idea what you're doing and need some help, give us a call. Our website is grindstoneagency.com. You can reach out to me anywhere. I'm all over social media, LinkedIn, Instagram. My LinkedIn is just Landon Rhodes. Instagram is Life of Landon. And I'm happy to talk to you guys through any of that stuff. And thank you if you're listening. Just thank you for listening to the show. I really appreciate you making it this far. And have a great rest of your day and keep striking.